Hello and welcome to Rubica's webinar today on how to develop a plan that ensures you hit your KPIs. My name's Andy Pedder and I'm a Principal Consultant of Strategy and Planning at Rubica. My background's in management consulting and I've focused on strategy and transformation over the years with experience in a number of sectors including hospitality, FMCG, transport, education and pharma. And my previous role to joining Rubica was actually doing strategic planning in an operations team for a large hospitality company. So helping them to translate that strategic plan into life. And so one of the most frequent questions I get asked is, how can we make it happen?
Yeah, and my name is Simon Crouch. I'm Principal Consultant for Performance Measurement and Change. And so I'm responsible for our performance measurement offers, including the PUMP methodology, evidence-based leadership, and our measurement and outcome consulting. A lot of the work I do with organizations is be clearer and more specific in the results they're looking to achieve, and then how we measure the progress towards that and create that feedback loop. Before I joined Rubica, I worked in an analytics background, and I worked in industries such as pharmaceuticals, insurance, and healthcare. And I often get asked the question, how do we move our measures, which has led us to running this webinar and the conversations I've been having with Andy.
So as Simon said, the key questions we need to ask are around the impact on the KPIs. So the first one is, how can we ensure the strategic plan is actually driving an impact on the KPIs? And then related to that, where there is little or no impact on performance, how can you then develop and refine a plan to deliver against these KPIs? And then we'll have some questions at the end.
Yeah, so to start this conversation, first of all, it's probably worth framing the PUMP process that we use. So for those who are familiar with PUMP, and it's a quick recap, and for those who are not, I'll give you a crash course in the PUMP methodology. The PUMP methodology is an 8-step approach to KPI design, and you can really break those 8 steps into 4 segments. The first 4 steps that we see on the screen here were about trying to create a common meaning of measurement and performance improvement. We're looking to address the way that we write our strategy so that it is measurable and we're working towards results. And then we look to design measures which give us direct evidence of our progress towards them. And then after we've done that, we get buy-in within the organization so that we get ownership of not only the measure, but the result it corresponds to. The second 4 steps in PUMP are more about the implementation of the performance measures. So within that, we look at implementing our measures, cutting out the assumptions we have around them. We look at how we present the data in a way that we can interpret change in performance. We look at creating reports and dashboards that we can use and make decisions from. And within that, we look at answering 3 critical questions: what happened, why did it happen, and what do we do next? And then once we move into step 8, it's actually about how we reach our performance targets, how we move the measure in the right direction. And that's really where the change process and the tool change track, which Andy will now go through, comes in.
So yeah, to introduce the change track, when we talk about it, we're really talking about an approach on which the tool is built, the tool itself, and then advisory coaching support, which is how we work with our clients. And really, it's a tried and tested approach to articulating a strategic vision, translating that into a high quality and actionable plan, then measuring the impact on performance. And then the piece we're specifically going to focus on today is really around, once you've got to that point and you're measuring the impact, how you then how you use the feedback loop to actually refine and iterate the plan, and do that on a continual basis to make sure you're driving your KPIs. And the process is actually uses agile, and what we mean by that is it comes from it's a method that comes from software development, and it really is the opposite of waterfall. So with waterfall, you'd make this long, elaborate plan and work to it, irrelevant of any feedback you got. Whereas agile, it was really around building a plan with certain hypotheses, taking feedback from the key measures, and then using those to actually inform the next iteration of planning, and using short fixed time periods of work, and then limiting the amount of work in process. So really focusing and prioritizing. So the way we like to look at these plans, really splitting them into the strategic part, which is from the vision to the priorities, and then the tactical part or the agile part, which is from the key results and sprints, and that leads into the output of the one-page plan. And it's that strategic part that it shouldn't change regularly. It shouldn't change over the course of a year or in some cases a few years. But it's actually that tactical part that should be constantly refined and iterated in order to achieve the outcomes we're looking for and to move the dial on our KPIs. So just as we kick off the webinar, we've made certain assumptions, and one of them, as we mentioned, is that you will have already worked through steps 1 to 7 of the pump process. So you already have you've identified the outcomes you want. You've kind of built a plan to move them. And so at this point, we're focusing on, once you know what those KPIs are and you've looked at their performance, how can you actually refine your plan and iterate it to actually move the dial on those that aren't shifting?
Yeah, and just to reiterate that and how it links with not only the pump process, but really the work we do in trying to get teams to be more results orientated. This process heavily links with that. So we start with those vision and fundamental results at a more corporate level, and then we break those down and cascade them through the organization, but keeping that clear line of sight as well. And as Andy said, we're looking at our more kind of longer term strategic results and then the more tactical results that we use to enable those. Within that process and the process of measurement, we look to prioritize the results and measures we're going to work on, which again links very nicely with the change track method, where it's all about prioritization in an agile way. The output of the dashboard that we get there at the end of the process, again, should be familiar to people who have performance measurement best practice within their organization. We've got clear results which have that clear line of sight to the more strategic corporate level. We have our measures which feed back on those and give ourselves a status of how we're moving towards the targets that we've set. And we answer those questions of what's happening, why has it happened, and what do we do next? And it's a question I'm always asked, is how do you know what's happening, why it's happened, and what do we do next? And the number one reason why people struggle to do this is normally they haven't linked it with some kind of plan, like Andy just went through there, that aligns the actions, the initiatives, and the more kind of tactical results with the higher level corporate results that they can align to and check against. So we have our feedback loop when we have this dashboard, and now Andy's going to show you how we can start to move those measures in the way that we go through a strategic planning process.
So on that note, we're really going to use one of these particular KPIs to focus the application of what we've talked about. So we're going to look at sleeper-diner ratio. And just before I jump into the tool, you'll be asking the question, what on earth is the sleeper-diner ratio? So just a quick bit of background. It's a measure that helps in hospitality, in hotels particularly, that gives you a measure of, for every person who sleeps in the hotel, how many of those people sleeping in the hotel actually dine there. And typically and historically in hotels, that number's been quite low, anything between 10 and 20%. And there's been a real focus in the last few years on how do they shift that and change that, especially when there's a lot of competition in restaurants for people leaving the hotel. So before we jump into the tool, the further background on this was a hospitality company wanting to transform from being purely kind of financially driven, short-term thinking, to actually being long-term focused on being customer-centric, so that they could be sustainable and competitive in the longer term. So the sleeper-diner ratio was one particular KPI that they were using, and I'll talk you through what that linked back to in a moment. But let's just jump into the tool. So in the tool, you can see the same dashboard that you just saw in PowerPoint version. And a couple of things just to draw your attention to. There's the opportunity to filter by strategic ambitions. There's an opportunity for stakeholders to comment and so on, so that everyone has visibility of this single dashboard where we will drive what's going on, and then use that to actually drive the plans that refine the impact. So the process, as you saw on the slides earlier, really translates strategic ambitions into key results and then sprints. We're going to jump in at the priorities that relate to the sleeper diner ratio KPI, just so you can see how it all ladders back up. So the three strategic ambitions are: one's focus on product and service design, so transforming the way the product and service elements of the hotels are designed in order to drive a more customer-centric guest experience or customer experience. Transforming the people and capabilities, so everything from how you recruit, getting the right people with the right training, all the way through to how you incentivize them in order to be customer-centric. And then the third big strategic ambition was around transforming the relationships with hotel owners and franchise partners to ensure that the hospitality company worked with those with the same vision and were incentivized in the right way to have a customer orientation rather than what they often have, which is a bottom line focus. So the KPI we're looking at, sleeper diner ratio, is part of strategic ambition 1, so product and service design. And you can see the key priorities here. And this is a short list, so part of the process is looking at what the long list of priorities are that would drive this strategic ambition, and then actually going through a process of prioritization to shortlist them. So these are the final three. And the one we're looking at is rethinking and designing our guest experience across the brands. So let's look at the key results. So you can see there's 4 key results that sit beneath this priority, and all that means is these 4 key results will tell you when that priority has been achieved or give you an indication of progress towards it. So if we scroll down, you can see a few of the key results. So one is driving a refurbishment program to improve our hotel's product. The second one is developing new restaurants and bar concepts. And this one you might have seen on the dashboard that actually one of the why on the dashboard was saying actually it's taken longer to develop these restaurants and bar concepts and roll them out than anticipated, and therefore the impact on the sleeper diner ratio was less than anticipated. And if we were refining the plan in this particular example, we'd be saying, well, developing new restaurant and bar concepts is quite a long-term key result to work to. It takes 6 to 12 months to develop a concept, and then even longer to roll it out across an entire estate of franchise hotels. So actually you wouldn't see the impact for several years, especially when you're talking about that volume of hotels. So actually, when thinking about the agile refinement of the plan, what we need in this case is actually something more short to medium term to actually drive that sleeper diner ratio. And if you look at the bottom on the redesign the service experiences at key journey stages, this is again a longer term play. So redesigning what service looks and feels like to the customer at different points in the hotel guest journey. So here's the kind of key result that we'd be looking to develop, which is a restaurant and bar commercial performance workshop. And again, you'll be asking, what does that mean? And I'll explain as I go through. So it's really quite simple insofar as it's the director of restaurants and bar outlets performance for the hospitality company, working with all the key restaurant and bar directors across all the hotels, and running a series of workshops with them focused on commercial performance using a sales and marketing playbook or a tool. So this key result is not really around changing the product or changing the service. It's more around changing the perception that customers have of that product and service, and actually driving more short to medium term commercial benefit and through the sleeper diner ratio. So you can see that there's the kind of key elements of the key result are who, the key result that it enables, and the value that that delivers. And so you'll see in this case as well, it's not strategically important. It's low on that. Actually, the changing the actual product and service is more strategic, but it's urgent because in order to move that KPI, something short to medium term has to happen quickly. And then you can see that the tool actually helps you to think about what the benefits are and against a number of different parts, a holistic view of the organization. So let's assume we save that, and then we actually go into sprint planning. So we take our key results and we bring it into sprint planning. This is the center of agile thinking, which is that you define a short period of time in which you want to work and drive out key results, and then you once you finish that, you take the feedback and start planning the next sprint of work. So as a team, we'd be looking at this is the first sprint on the left-hand side, and we've got a number of key results in it. We've just added restaurant and bar commercial performance workshops. And the key question here would be, in a 3-week period, or however we define it, if we decide it's 2 months, is this a realistic target of key results we're going to achieve? And if not, we might have to trade off some other things in order to make sure that our restaurant and bar commercial performance workshops are prioritized. So once we're comfortable with that, and bear in mind there's certain things we leave out as well, as we prioritize, you have to drop things. We would then move on to, this then produces our one-page plan. And just before I go on to the one-page plan, this should be a regular thing we do as a team, is to come back to the sprint planning. Once we finish sprint 1, we should then look at the impact on the dashboard and come back to this and say, okay, what are the key things we should be focusing on to move the dial in sprint 2? So as you click finish, it takes you to the one-page plan. And again, just to signpost a little bit, in the top right-hand corner, again, you can filter by strategic ambitions. So if you remember, there were 3. You can, all key stakeholders have visibility and can write comments, and then you can actually use them to refine the plan, or you can respond to indicate you've actually actioned them. And then you can see below each strategic ambition, you've got your shortlisted priorities, and then to the right of that, you have target completion date, ownership, and then the sprint part. So what we're looking at here is, again, we're focused on strategic ambition 1, and there's actually one key result that's from this strategic ambition and this priority that sits in sprint 1, and it's the one we've just decided, restaurants and bar commercial performance workshops. So you can see it's 50% complete. And so if we click on the drop down, you'll see it breaks down all the bits that we completed earlier, so all the different elements to the key result. And then also on the right hand side, you have this task part, and really what that's for is to actually plan, in order to achieve this key result, these are the key tasks that we need to deliver, and then you can actually complete them. So at the moment it's 50%, you can see, and obviously if I were to complete this, it would move to 100%. So it's a very simple factor of how many complete tasks there are compared to the total there. So your one-page plan and your dashboard should work very much in partnership. This one-page plan gives you a view of all the activity, the effort that's going on in order to move the KPIs. And then when you move to the dashboard again, you see how that effort is actually being pulled through. So the top 2 KPIs are obviously green, and the bottom 2 are not in a great place. They're not hitting the mark. So with the sleeper diner ratio, we would be over time monitoring that following our new key result and seeing what's the impact. And obviously some of the key questions we'd be asking are, well, how long do we expect it to take before we see that impact on the KPI? And if it's immediate, then we'd expect to see, given that we've completed 100% of our workload, we'd expect to see that impact coming straight away and us moving towards our targets. And the advantage of this is this bottom piece links the KPI back to the one-page plan, because you can, in a very quick view, see how much of the effort and workload has been completed, how much of the activity has been done, and therefore would we expect to see some of the impact on the KPI. So over time, you'd expect to monitor the KPIs and the one-page plan, and constantly refine your plan based on the feedback you're getting. Are the key results you're working on actually driving impact? And if they're not, then changing and refining. If they are, then maybe doubling down on them. So there's the one-page plan and dashboard. And we're just going to exit the tool briefly. So that completes today's webinar. I hope you've enjoyed it, and thank you very much.